Hi, everybody. Welcome to the November issue of Compassion Chats. My name is Susan Marshall. I am the author of Mom's Gone Missing, When a Parent's Changing Life Upends Yours, and your host for these monthly Compassion Chats. We meet the fourth Tuesday of every month at 6 p.m. Central in an informal chat environment to bring caregivers together with some remarkable resources that I personally have discovered since Mom's Gone Missing came out a year ago. The session is being recorded, so we'd ask you to mute yourself until we open up for Q&A toward the end of the chat. However, you're welcome to post questions in the chat feature, and we will read them and have Gary answer them as we go. I am thrilled and truly honored to welcome tonight's guest. Gary Barg is the founder and CEO of Caregiver.com and the editor-in-chief of today's Caregiver magazine. Gary, we are absolutely thrilled to have you. Welcome. Thanks for making time for us this evening.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here, and I'll always make time for a Caregiver book club author. So I enjoyed our interview that's on Caregiver.com a few months ago very, very much.
Thank you. I also enjoyed it, and I actually have something you said to me during that conversation that I want to chat a little bit about tonight. But we love to start these chats getting to know a little bit about your personal backstory. I know that you, like many, many caregivers, have a story that brought you to the work, but give us a little bit from the Jurassic era, as you like to say. Tell us a little bit about Gary, how you grew into this work, and the event that brought you to it in a serious way.
Well, I always say that all the caregiver advocates that I've met over the last 26 years, that I really love the work they're doing. If you drill down, there's a personal story. And my personal story started, you're right, in the Jurassic era. Dad retired, and I was born in Miami Beach, raised in North Miami Beach. My family's all here. But I was living in Atlanta in 90, and Dad retired and immediately developed bone marrow cancer. So Mom went from love of life for 50 years to partner in a new venture that they were doing, and to a caregiver and all that goes with that. And I would come in. My brother was living in New Orleans, and my sister had two little kids, and she was in Miami. So we all had lives that kept us away from being there with her completely. But I was on the phone with her every single week, and between my brother and I, one of us would come in at least once every 6 weeks to be there for a weekend and help her and just support her. But I always say we caregivers are a sneaky lot, because Mom could make everything look beautiful for those 2-3 days, and we had no idea what was going on. And we just thought, oh, look, we came in and we helped and we supported. Look, how wonderful is that? And went back to our lives. And it was Dad had passed in 91, and my grandparents took ill pretty much immediately after, with cancer, Alzheimer's, strokes, diabetes. Doctors loved us, insurance companies, not so much. And still, I was on the phone with Mom every Sunday. We'd have our conversation. And one Sunday, the summer of 94, I was in Atlanta getting set up to do work for the 96 Olympics, doing video work, because I was a video producer. And I heard it in her voice. She couldn't hide it anymore. It was cracking. So I called my brother and sister. I said, I have 2 weeks before I start doing all these projects. I'm going to go in and be with Mom and, support her and help her make decisions and whatever. And as soon as I came back to South Florida, after 2 or 3 days, I was living the life of a caregiver, or a caregiver's caregiver, like I like to call it. And every day and every night and every minute was life and death decisions, and in and out of hospital waiting rooms, and trying to figure out things as my grandfather's cognition, decreased, and my grandmother's mobility decreased, and it was just terrible. It was so many answers I didn't have to so many questions I needed to answer. And I remember the night before I was going to get on the plane and leave and go back to Atlanta. And I vividly remember this, sitting at dinner at mom's house. And I said, boy, oh boy, am I glad I came in these 2 weeks, because look at what you went through. And that was my moment of reckoning, because what I thought was the worst, painful, dreadful, life and death, decision, constant challenges, 2 week period was just a normal 2 weeks in a caregiver's life. She looked at me dumbfounded. She didn't know what I was talking about. So I brought my life back down to South Florida to become a caregiver's caregiver. She didn't ask me to. She didn't ask me to give up my life in Atlanta, but I couldn't. Once I saw that, my eyes were open, there's no way I'm going back and pretending that wasn't happening. So I came back to South Florida and helped her with my grandparents, and took some of the pressure off her. And I found that almost immediately the best support, solutions, advice, camaraderie I found was from my fellow family caregivers, walking in and out of long-term care facilities, sitting in hospital waiting rooms at 3 a.m, sitting in emergency room waiting rooms, sitting in doctor's offices. And the wisdom shared was immense. And so actually on July 4th, 1995, I went to the printer and picked up the first editions of Today's Caregiver magazine.
Love it.
And since then, who knows how many editions there are, but we've done 150 or so covers with caregivers with famous faces. People like, Jennifer, people who are caregivers, but also have famous faces. And that created the book, Caregiving Ties That Bind, which is what we've learned from these folks who you think have no problems. Oh, they're rich, they're famous. They're still a daughter, a son, a loved one. And then we wrote the Fearless Caregiver, which is how to wait a second. How to get the best care for your loved one and still have a life of your own.
I can really
It's in its
relate to
fourth
that.
edition, but it's been a long time. And that's what we try to make sure that family caregivers become, is fearless advocates, CEOs of caring for my loved ones, Inc., making sure they're equal members of their loved one's care team. And when the pandemic came around, we had done 287 in-person Fearless Caregiver conferences in 45 cities and 27 states, because we want to go where the caregivers are. You can't say, I'm going to do a national conference and have people come to me, because how do you do that? So we've been in, small or rural cities and large urban communities, and from, Kodiak, Alaska to South Florida to Maine to Southern California. But when the ability to do that stopped in February of 2020, we still needed the connection. We still needed to support. And like you're doing, we jumped on Zoom and we started doing, events and conferences and things. But we also realized the camaraderie was important. So we all sat down and thought, what have we learned from our fellow family caregivers? Because that's where the lessons are. We don't stand up there and pontificate and PowerPoint. The caregivers, we open a forum where everybody can answer and ask and interact, from doctors to family caregiver who just stepped into the role. And we put together You Are Not Alone, which is the book that really synthesizes the lessons we've learned from family caregivers over the last 23 years of doing the events. And then started doing events virtually. So sorry for rolling on like this, but talking about caregivers, I can't stop.
Well, and it's fantastic, Gary. And the fact that you've been doing this for so long is a tremendous comfort. What you said as you began telling your story really strikes me over and over and over again. We have regular lives, we're busy, we go, we say nice things, we do wonderful things, we help, and then we're like, yeah, see ya, I got other stuff to do. It doesn't really do anything But when you see, as you say, once your eyes are opened, you can't not respond. However, just because your eyes get open doesn't mean you're equipped, right? So many of us get into this role. We're like, what do I do now? What do I do next? So the work that you've done over these 20 plus years to bring together resources is tremendously helpful. And yet, has it been your experience that caregivers who come to this, A, are aware that all these resources exist, that you exist, and B, where to find them?
Well, that's our constant challenge, and it always is. You know, when I run into someone and they ask what I do, and so I wish I had that 5 years ago. Well, we were here, you know. So
I've said those very words.
77.6 million caregivers in this country right now, and it going up astronomically. Our job is cut out for us, and also the idea of self-identification. I mean, we're today's Caregiver magazine, Fearless Caregiver Conference. We do a caregiver friendly award for products and services and media authors who are write and create products and solutions for family caregivers, and have the conference. I don't remember what I didn't say, but the caregiver.com. And the word is challenging because so many times, especially, you know, we're standing in a room of hundreds of caregivers in the Fearless Caregiver Conferences, and self-identification is a challenge. You know, I'm not a caregiver. I'm just dedicated daughter, loving son, devoted husband, you know, challenged wife. I'm doing everything I can. I'm working, you know, 40 hours a week. I'm doing caregiving, you know, 36 hours a day, every single day. And I have my family to care for too. So, but I always say that there are two issues you need to think about. One is you have actually stepped into a new job role, now have a new job, and you are the CEO of Caring for Your Loved One, Inc. And you also need to be a fearless caregiver and a fearless caregiver advocate for your loved one. So you are supporting them in getting the best the healthcare system has to offer. But along with that, job one is, and here's, I always say, here's why I lose the audience, caring for yourself. And people, caregivers will go,
Right.
care for me. I don't have time to care for me. What are you talking about? I'm doing all this stuff. And I always say, okay, fine. You tell me who's going to step in and care for you and your loved one when you fall apart, taking yourself out of the circle of care, not caring for yourself, not having unmitigated stress, you know, not eating well, not exercising. You tell me who's going to step in and care for both of you, and I'll stop harassing you about it.
Well, and in fact, such an important point. I had a dear friend when I was going through this with mom and dad, who actually was an industrial psychologist. And I would say to him, Gary, just what you are talking about now, mom's not taking care of herself. I'm terribly worried about her. She's like, you know what, this is my job, for better or for worse. I married this guy, and I know a lot of people right now who feel that very same way. He said, you tell your mother 80+% of caregivers go down before those they care for, just because of this, the stress and the lack of taking care of themselves. And I said, you know what, George, would you call her? I don't know that she's going to hear that from me.
She won't listen to me, but she'll listen to you. So
Yes.
I know.
Yeah. But, you know, it's interesting when you think about that, does that not also add a burden to a caregiver who is exhausted, who is uncertain about resources? I think about the challenges in 3 different buckets, which we'll talk about in a sec. But it's like, who's going to take care of if you don't take care of you and you take yourself out? Does that add a level of shame, of guilt, of perhaps blame that caregivers naturally resist?
Well, I think there are a handful of words that caregivers don't deserve to ever hear or feel or think about. And those are some of them: shame, guilt, embarrassment, fear, you know, not doing enough. That's just throw it away, because you don't deserve any. You're the one who stepped forward. It's like the old joke about the military where they ask for volunteers and everybody else steps back.
Right.
You're the one who stepped forward. You don't deserve anything but all of our support. And also, when I say that you're the CEO of Caring for Your Loved One, Inc., or you're the fearless caregiver, you need tools. On caregiver.com, we have a tool called the reverse gift list. And as a caregiver, you need to see what the elements of your job role is. So I always say, take a piece of paper, a computer screen, the left side, if the things I need, and the right side, people could help. And I don't mean the big stuff. I don't mean, make medical decisions or take over. I just mean the bite-sized, easy, the pile of things we have to deal with, from cooking all the time to going to the drugstore all the time, to taking dad, be the one to take to dad, even to regular doctor's appointments, to just getting some relief. And I always say, put together those bite-sized, easy. For example, your neighbor who always asks, what can I do? And you say, oh, I don't want anybody involved. I don't want. So you know what? Next time you go to the grocery store, I have a small list. I won't ask you, but, and here's the money. And could you get me these handful of things? Next time you go to the dry cleaners, have a small list and here's money. Or your cousin's son or daughter is great with cars. Can you come over and fix dad's car? Can you mow the lawn? When I talk at the conferences, well, first of all, you put the list, those 10 bite-sized, easy, manageable things you do for anybody do for you. And then you have the people you connected. Oh, this one can do that for me. This one. Then make the ask. And instead of being embarrassed or ashamed or thinking no one's going to help, people are thrilled to help if you just tell them what to do. And it's something they can do. Your brother who's 4 states over and doesn't really know what's going on. Fine. You buy the incontinence products. Don't worry about a thing. You're a hero. You've done everything you can, but you're buying the incontinence products. Just go online, find a place where they automatically replenish and use your credit card. That's all I ask from you. So make the ask, because I've never seen a situation in all these years where a caregiver comes up to me and said, I asked somebody to do something easy and they wouldn't do it, because everyone's happy to help in whatever small way they can. And then make sure that some of it's for you too. Come over and cook and spend time with me and talk about anything but caregiving. And one quick thing, when we talk about, we go to the conference as well, we are, and hopefully do again. Right now they're virtual. And we'll ask people what their list is. The number one thing on the list is, I want my sister to come over and just sit with me and do laundry so we can spend time together and laugh like we used to.
Oh boy, that laughter goes away so quickly, doesn't it?
So important. Such medicine, laughter is good medicine. Never more important than when you're a family caregiver. And there's stuff that we can laugh about that other people go, oh, what are you talking?
Yeah, that's not funny.
But they're funny to us. It's funny to us.
Right.
Once a year on caregiver.com, we ask people for their real, honest, humorous caregiver stories. And you can't make this stuff up. It's wonderful to share and see the laugh on caregivers' faces when you share the other caregivers and they recognize the humor in the situation, and it takes a lot of pressure off.
Well, and it brings the humanity back to so much of this, doesn't it? I want to talk a little bit about the caregiver challenges, because as gifted as most people are, as caring as most people are, the challenges fall into 3 pretty distinct buckets, just big generalizations. One is the systems, right? Whether it's healthcare, financial, or legal. So we've got the whole systems thing we have to somehow manage and know what to ask and of whom. Secondly, you've got the family, oftentimes siblings, as you and I have chatted about. And then the third bucket is self, just what you're talking about. How do I manage my own feelings? Those 3 buckets require very different skills, very different energies, and even different preparation, don't they?
I say there are 2 sets of 3-letter words, 3-letter phrases that you need to have in your toolkit with you all the time. And one is when you're dealing with the system and you're on the phone and somebody, it's somewhere far away is keeping you from the insurance you need or the support you need, or you're not getting the advice you think because you've investigated their insurance policy. What's appropriate, and you say 3 words. Who's your supervisor?
I love it. I've seen you at your conferences. I love that.
And
But
you
it
keep
takes,
going up the chain, because the higher you go up the chain, the more they want this process handled. They're not, okay, I've gone up to, here's the answer. Go away. Oh, good, I got my answer. The second set of 3 words is not in that situation, but like when your loved one is dealing with cognitive issues and you're having challenging behaviors and they're angry or they're exhausting you. Think about why you're doing it and put their face in your hands and look them deep in the eyes and say, I love you. Those 2 sets of 3 words are going to take you far.
how do I get mentally to that place when I'm frustrated because my siblings have dissed me, when my decisions are being challenged, even though they know nothing about the situation, right? Like the brother 4 states over, what have you. How, Gary, help me understand, how do I mentally get to that place? Do I have to stop? Do I breathe? What's your recommendation for caregivers who are just wigged out?
Deep breathing is pretty
Hear
good.
those words.
We did an event in where was it? In Arkansas, in a rural town in Arkansas. And this conversation came up and the caregivers raised her hand and I walked over to the mic. She said, I can't do this everywhere. I go out to the back 40 and I scream as loud as I can. Well, not everyone has a back 40, but that's a good answer. I think what has to happen is your program that you guys are putting on, hopefully us with what we do, stay connected. Isolation is a killer for caregivers. Support groups, now virtual, but once again, hopefully in person. Because, about support groups, I get the fact that, I don't want to, these people are whining and they're that's not going to help me at all. And I don't, that initial
Downer, it's just a downer. I don't want to be around downers. Yeah, right.
And I always say, it's like you parachuted into a raucous family holiday dinner and you're sitting there going, what's going, I don't. And then you go again and you're like, oh, I kind of get this. This is kind of fun. I always say, go to a well-run support group 3 times. The first time, yep, you're going to sit there and go, what are these people? I don't want any part of this. The second time, you're going to start hearing yourself in these stories. And the third time, you're going to get on the phone with everybody and talk about this new thing that you discovered. So any kind of support. I mean, they should see your program when you do it once a month. Hopefully they come to our in-person and live, in-person and virtual Fearless Caregiver conferences, or get our free newsletter we do on caregiver.com. Don't isolate yourself. It's like, the story about the frog in the pot of water. It gets in cool. You turn up the heat, doesn't realize, and it drowns. You can't do that. You're too important. Your life, your health. First of all, you deserve it. Secondly, all your family needs it. So you gotta get support from people who get it. There's now a commercial on TV, I guess you saw, about some mental health app where why having challenges, and my friend said, go golfing. It's kind of, take a cruise, or
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go around, be around people who get it, and you will find out that it will take the rocks off your shoulders. It'll be an amazing support, and you will find your family of choice. The support group or your folks on your webinar, or folks that come visit us, becomes your family of choice. And year after year after year, we find caregivers coming back when we go into the town every year. So The thing I would say, if you trust me at all in any way, shape, or form, is don't isolate. Get
Is
around people who get it.
Yeah, is that, so I think about, there have to be some well-intentioned but common mistakes, errors of judgment, assumptions, what have, that's got to be right at the top of the list. You know what? I got this. I can do this. I don't want to burden anybody. And that tends to be isolating because you just can't share.
And
What
no,
other,
nobody can do all this alone. You need a, it takes a village. It takes, you're the CEO of Caring for Your Loved One, Inc. The CEO of Ford isn't on the line putting air in the tires. You have to see yourself in that, be able to distance yourself in a sense. You go, okay, I know who I am. I know I adore my mom. I know I don't want her to be in pain, but also need to put myself in a role of being the manager of this important organization and see what needs to be done and get it done. And a lot of times that's respite in itself.
it is, and yet I have seen, and I'm sure you have thousands of times, people who don't have that sense of self, who have been, caretakers of everybody around them forever, will never say an ill-advised word about anyone. It's like, oh dear. And I love your conference. What's your mantra at your conferences?
I am a fearless caregiver. Don't mess with me.
Exactly. And I know people who would never say those words because they sound aggressive and they sound not nice. And
Well,
helping people get past that mindset, I think, is critical.
it's a lot of it is who you are. If you say, I'm going to bring the best of me to the picture here, and I'm going to do the things I need, you're not going to necessarily stand up and point your finger at the doctor, but maybe you could take a tape recorder and say, I'd like to tape record what you're saying so I can remember it. Nothing slows a healthcare professional, makes him talk, clear and concise more than when you put your phone or your tape recorder on the table. And we did an event in North Carolina, and the doctor on the panel said, I wouldn't go to a doctor who wouldn't let you do that. It's so important that you're able to do that. So, it's, and then quickly, I did something with my mom's geriatrician. She lives in a community where there's a lot of seniors. This is the big geriatric office. And the doctor kept saying to her, Monica, people your age, people as old as you, and she doesn't see herself. I don't see myself my age until I look in the camera and I go, oh, she doesn't see herself as 88 years old. And I saw it just melt her. And even the other doctor in the room was going, oh. And I said, look, why don't we try this? Instead of saying, people as old as you, why don't you say people as beautiful as you? Just say, we all know it's a little gimmicky thing. And the doctor smiled and said, okay, I get it. I get it. He got what I was saying without me banging on him, and since then he's been good, but people as beautiful as you, because it's really hard for us to take the person out of the illness, out of the disease. That's person with the cognition challenges is still your loved one, but now needs to be interacted with differently. And I never like the phrase parenting your parent. Just there's too much negativity to that. But you need to be able to think within their framework.
Well, and that's something that I learned, and as you know, I wrote about in the book Mom's Gone Missing, from the chaplain. Don't try to bring them into your world, go to theirs. And that is true in so many dimensions. And this is an absolutely perfect example of that.
Right. So I was at Lisa Gibbons had these local organizations, and there was one, I don't know if that's still there, but in Fort Lauderdale, support groups. And there was a gentleman who, Dr. Richard Taylor, who who unfortunately passed a few years ago, but he, brilliant man, from Houston, developed Alzheimer's, wrote a book while he was living with Alzheimer's, traveled the world and got the Alzheimer's Association, one of the people, to think about Alzheimer's, people living with Alzheimer's as a special interest group, as opposed to those people who were helping. And very quickly, a lady stood up and raised her hand. She said, Dr. Taylor, my husband keeps asking me the same question over and over. And as she's recounting this story, she's getting madder and madder and redder face and red face. We would go someplace, and while we're dressing, he'd say, where are we going? And I told him again. And then we're in the car, the same question. I said, and Richard was wonderful. He said,
1 sec.
here's the thing. My Siri just answered me, sorry.
I love it.
Here's the thing. You hear yourself saying this 15 times, getting mad, getting frustrated, you don't know what's going on. Every time to him is the first time. And every single time he sees that he's hurting you, that you're angry, that you're in pain. And it's awful for him. And the fact is, you can talk to him, you can interact with him. That day will leave you soon, and you'll be missing the fact that you're able to talk to him. And she broke down. She went up and hugged him. She said, thank you for reframing that for me, because that made all the difference.
And so much of this is just that, isn't it? Reframing. Give me a different way to think about this. Give me permission. It sounds silly to say it that way, but as a caregiver who is distraught, exhausted, help me. In your support group recommendation is absolutely true. Somebody give me permission. That's a terrible way to say it, but emotionally, that's kind of what's going on, right? Yeah. I need to take a break, because not only am I going to get red faced, I'm going to have I'm going to have my fist clenched, and I'm going to, and we don't know that we're distressing the ever living daylights out of the individual who's innocently asking for the first time, even though it's the 20th.
First time, they don't know, they don't remember. Oh, let me ask this question, and all of a sudden you get. And what I loved is Richard, as somebody living with Alzheimer's, was able to show her within his framework what her husband was thinking and feeling, and it opened her eyes. It was wonderful.
That's incredible. So talk to us, Gary, about your Fearless Caregiver conferences. How do you put them together? What's kind of the mission there? How long do they go?
Sure.
Who can come?
Well, as I said, we from 1998 to the 2020, we did 287. Our first one had Robert Urich, if you remember him, the wonderful, yes. Wonderful actor, wonderful star, had cancer, and then he was in remission, and he came, and people adored him. And nobody knew, cowboy star, nobody knew, but he was a magnificent singer. He was going to do Man of La Mancha in Chicago. And he said, would anybody mind if I sang? And everyone's going, "Rrr, rrr." And he drew us to tears.
Wow.
And he stopped and he talked to every single person. And in the meantime, we've had Debbie Reynolds and Della Reese and Clay Walker and Clay Aiken and Linda Dano and a whole bunch of folks at our Patricia Richardson, who are magnificent and couldn't be more loving to the hundreds of caregivers in the audience, and spending time with them and interacting. Henry Winkler, but also, when we, even then, the caregivers were the celebrities, and so we would make sure that we weren't pontificating, we weren't speechifying, we weren't bloviating, oh, here's what you need to do. No, we had a room where the caregivers were in the middle, surrounded by information resource tables with a panel up front, and the doctors and the lawyers, elder attorneys, and the care managers and the area agency folks, and people who had, I always say, if your CEO wants to come, we'll let them talk at the beginning, but we want people who know how the trains run, what the schedule is. If I have a question, they can answer it, care managers. So local, we have national folks who would come in too, but You know, if I put an elder care attorney from 4, 5, 6 states over on a panel, they won't have any answers. But I put a leading elder care attorney in their community, not only have the answers, but they'll be able to go to their table and get follow-up information.
You know, Gary, that's the point you made when we chatted months ago. You said, you know, this caregiving thing is universal, but resources are local.
Yeah, all caregiving is national implication. You need to know about Medicare, Medicaid, even statewide, you know, Medi-Cal. You need to know about Social Security, what your state's doing, what the national government's doing, who you could yell at, but local and application. Because if I told you about something that's important to people in California and we're at a conference in Palm Beach County, Florida, not so helpful. And it, you know, it was a lot of traveling and a lot of bad airline coffee and you know, but it was all worth it to be in the room with the family caregivers and talk about them and what they were going through. And we'll get back to that. Now on December 1st, we're doing one for Connecticut. And what's fun about the virtual events, we've done about 8 of them so far, Fort Worth, Texas, and a handful of places in Florida and some other cities. But since it's virtual, I'm sitting here, and we're talking about national, you know, concepts, a concept that maybe not the answer from the elder care attorney in Connecticut, but the answer to find an elder care attorney if you're, you know, tuning in from some other place. And we're finding people are actually joining the webinar from other communities and getting so much out of it. It's like just peering into what's going on into communities, and also people in Connecticut. So it's December 1st. They go on caregiver.com and find the sign up page, and free. We never, in person or virtual, we have never charged a family caregiver a shekel. They would never, in person, it's always a nice meal. You know, it's always all the answers they need, all the support they need. And we just decided from day one, we would never charge a caregiver. You know, there's sponsors and other ways that you get money for this, but I don't want, even if it's, sometimes people say, oh, you know, $5 and they'll feel connected. No, I don't want to take a dime. I don't want a penny from them. And they feel connected. And we have a great, you know, amount of follow-up, and we have very, very low no-show. So that kind of works. So December 1st for the Connecticut event, do come no matter where you're living. And we'd love to share the day with you.
That's fantastic. I will also say for caregivers who are with us and who will be listening to this post recording that I just had an experience like this, Gary, where once you get within a family of caregivers, you look out for each other. For example, I had an uncle, aunt and uncle who live in Arkansas. Uncle passed about 6 or 8 weeks ago. Aunt is there by herself. She is cognitively challenged. The kids are, you know, different states, Wisconsin, and one actually lives in the Netherlands, and asked if I knew of a resource where they could find an elder care attorney in Arkansas. So I reached out to Tim Harrington at the Alzheimer's Association locally, and he said, you know, as fate would have it, I just met a person and her boss from Arkansas. He connected us. They, within hours, gave me a law office there that they had worked with personally, could recommend.
So
I sent it to my cousins. That's how this all works. But we have to start by making ourselves available to a support group, by joining things like this, by coming to your conferences, by subscribing to today's Caregiver magazine. It's fabulous. The newsletters come frequently, chock full of information. This is the work that we need to continue encouraging people to do because we need each other. One last thing I want to chat briefly about, and then I want to open it up to any questions others might have or comments. Let's talk a little bit about humor. because it can be a really tricky kind of thing, right? If you say something that you think is kind of funny and somebody's just having one of those days, does it risk friction or fissions within relationships?
Well, the humor that we generally get is experiential. I'll give you one in particular. In Fort Lauderdale, many years ago, a caregiver came at the end of the event. She said, "I'm so sorry, I'm late. I had my husband to the neurologist who was giving him tests. The word test came up, and he'd say, okay, Tom, how do you spell this?" And he spelled it. "How do you spell that?" And he spelled it. "Okay, Tom, how do you spell world?" Husband, WRLD. And the doctor thought, yeah, let's make it tougher. "Okay, Tom, now backwards. I was there. The lady said this. Okay, WORLD.
I love it.
Can't make this stuff up.
No, right. That's creative.
So, but there's a lot of the experiential humor is fun. I don't know, tell jokes at anyone's expense in caregiving, but when you share these stories that happen to you, that's funny, and it relates to other caregivers, it takes a lot of the pressure off, the loneliness off, the isolation off.
Absolutely. Do you have, can you think about, in all of the years that you've been doing this, a particularly most poignant moment that you can remember at one of your conferences?
The hugging. I mean, there was, we had Delarice at an event in Philadelphia, and she and I were on the podium and interacting, and she was asking questions to the audience. The lady stood up. She said, "Well, I knew I had to be here, but I never take care of myself. I'm caring for all these seniors in my community, and my mom is being prepped for surgery today, but I knew I had to be here, and I'm glad I was, because I got to go back." And what I thought was amazing is she didn't recognize she was saying, "Well, I had a small stroke and I had heart issues." She was talking about her health as if it was unimportant. And another lady from across the room stood up and she said, because the lady mentored her community, she said, "I live in that community, and from now on you have help." And I'll tell you, the next year we're in another location in Philly, and they were sitting together like sisters. And I thought, that's what caregiving is all about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll open up to questions, and I've got one closing question before we.
First, I want to tell you, you're in our book club.
Love it. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Delighted to be there. And I can't tell you how excited I am, Gary, that you're with us. So, Rod Adele, you are with us. Do you have a question or a comment for Gary after hearing his many, many experiences and years of caregiver support?
Centuries.
No.
So I have a list of questions, but don't worry, Susan, I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm going to pick out two of them. So one is, I've worked in the long-term care with seniors, families for 33 years. And one of the things that I have found over time is I am constantly feeling compelled to redefine what is an honoring response for usually an adult child caring for their parent, sometimes different situations. And what I mean by that is, I'll be talking with a daughter, walking her through the crisis, and mom needs to move. She's not safe, but she's not willing, and whatever. And so they go down that path, and I'll say, "Well, tell me about the conversation. What does it sound like?" And they'll say, "Well, I say this, then she says this, then I say this, then she says that." And of course, she can play both sides because they've had the same conversation time and time and time again. So, and at some point in time, and I'll say, "How does the conversation end?" Well, and it's usually mom gets sad, dad gets mad. Sometimes that's swapped, but usually that's it. And so then I say, "So then what do you do when mom gets sad?" Well, that's kind of the end of the conversation. I said, "Why do you think that's the end of the conversation?" And they're not sure. And I point out to them, I believe in that moment, when you've elicited a response from your parent that you learned as a child was not a good response, I think we become like 12 in that moment.
Yes.
And we are no longer feeling like we're doing the right thing. So I'm a bad child. And my point is, they need to redefine what honoring is, not as a 12-year-old, but as an adult child caring for a loved one who's no longer capable of sometimes cognitively thinking through things or whatever. So my point to you is, or my question to you is, how do you frame that? How do you walk through that part of it when they're trying to do the right thing, but their honoring definition, in essence, is keeping mom or dad happy and doing what they want?
Yeah, I think there are two things. I'm responding quickly because this is a question that comes up a lot at the conferences, and I'm living through right now. So there are two issues. One is if you could bring that outside expert in, if you could have a geriatric care manager come who really knows how to frame the conversation, who's a step away. You know, sometimes when people say, my mom makes me so mad, I say, just think of this situation as the elevator door opens, a stranger on the elevator. That person doesn't make you mad. You have to deconstruct the relationship to get what you need out of it. So the other thing is that sad moment, that's an opportunity, because your mom's still your mom. Your mom still wants you to be happy. Your mom's still doing everything they can within the framework of what they can do to support you. And that's when you can be really honest and say, Mom, touch her. This is important to me. This makes me so sad. I know that what you want, but I know that you'll be better. And I know that it's a lot of stress on me. It's a lot of pain on me. And I know you don't want that. And so a lot of times I call that caregiver jujitsu. You take the energy that they're forcing at you and turn it around and use it for your benefit.
That's great. One more quick question. You talked about all the humor, about the funny caregiver stories. If you have a place where they exist, whether it's online or on your website or whatever, I'd love to know where we find that, because I'd love to share so that there's more humor going around.
Yeah.
And not just the tools and the serious conversation.
It's on caregiver.com. If you search humor, sometimes they'll come in and I'll use it. We do 2 newsletters a week. One is the headline generally is a caregiver who's told us a story about how they were fearless, what element they had in their life, what moment they felt fearless, and that they're the Tuesday hero. And then there's journalist articles. And Thursday, I write a column. So whatever I'm learning, it was a lot easier when I was traveling around talking to family caregivers, because I always say, I'm stealing that from you. By the way, that lesson you just told me, I'm going to share it with everybody. So on occasion, I'll write about humor stories I find. And then, so that's in our newsletter search. If you just put in the word humor. And if not, contact me and I'll get you the list.
What's next for the, your plan for the new year?
Oh, it just occurred to me that the new year, wait a second, we're weeks away from 2022. Well, what we're doing is we're gonna do caregiver thought leader interviews on Zoom and digitally and in the print. And we're gonna reach out to a lot of the thought leaders, Secretary of Aging, ex-Secretary of Aging, heads of organizations, and get their prognostication for the year forward in caregiving. Hopefully, we thought we'd be back doing in-person events by now, because there's really nothing better, because virtual hugs are okay, but real hugs are so much better. So hopefully, we don't know, I don't know, that by February, we might reinstitute some of our in-person events. There's in-person and virtual combos now we're thinking of. Obviously, you need social distancing and it's not 300 people in the room anymore. With this one in December 1st, with the Area Agency on Aging in South Central Connecticut, we thought we were going to go in person, but about 6 weeks ago, they contacted us and went, not yet. So you know, like caregiving, you just got to stay flexible. But anything about, and then we start our Caregiver Friendly Award nomination process again, products and services and media and organizations that put the caregivers first. So that's not bad for, you know, the first quarter 2021, 22.
That's fantastic. And Gary, I will stay in touch with you because I think there could be some real synergy in what we're trying to do here in our humble little way. But before we close, one last bit of advice for caregivers. You know, if this is the last word you had with caregivers, what would you share?
I would say, and I would say to professional caregivers who are caring for us, when you see us, we're not just the person who brought your client in, we're a person in need and challenged because we are caregivers as well. And you have two clients in a sense. And the same thing for family caregivers. You know, when your loved one gets all the rest they need and you're like operating on 2 hours a night, that's not helpful. Taking yourself out of the circle of care. When your loved one gets to physical therapy as often as possible, but you can't remember the last time you were in a gym. When you're, you know, like my mom was, my dad had cancer, she was just Dr. Frankenstein in the kitchen, cooking up anything that could make it palatable to him, but was good for him. And she became great at that. But, you know, I always say that when a caregiver does all that, but when they eat themselves, it's at a drive-through at midnight, ordering through a clown's mouth. The problem there is you're not just hurting yourself, you're hurting the person you care for, because caring for yourself is job one. And again, I know I get slapped around for that, but I know because I'm a primary caregiver. I'm what I call a serial caregiver, that how hard it is. But I also need, I know that you need to take those moments where you defocus on them and focus on yourself so you could just get yourself back in the fray. Caring for yourself is job one. And I love each and every caregiver I've ever met and the ones I haven't met yet. Absolutely
wonderful. Gary, thank you. I can't thank you enough for being with us tonight. Everyone who's here and will be listening to this, caregiver.com. There are books, there are publications, there's newsletters, there are conferences. I want to talk with you, Gary, offline another time about bringing your Fearless Caregiver Conference here to Wisconsin. We could do that.
Where are you in Wisconsin?
I'm in a little town called Oconomowoc. We're north of Milwaukee, and midpoint between Milwaukee and Madison. So
I know Oconomowoc. By the way, we've done Wisconsin. Don't ask me where. We've done 2 Wisconsin Fearless Caregiver Conferences over the last century. So would love to be there and let's talk.
Wonderful. Gary, thank you so much. Everybody, caregiver.com to find Gary's information, SusanAMarshall.com to hear a recording of this, to see the full archive of the compassion chats that we have had this year, and stay tuned for our 2022 compassion chat plan. Thank you all for being here. Happy Thanksgiving. Gary, blessings to you.
Happy Thanksgiving and happy holidays to everybody.
Thanks. Bye all.